1. The event I will be writing about is 100% true. It happened June 15, 2017, around 10:30 a.m. The weather was clear, sunny and hot. I was alone at the time, but there was traffic and people going in and out of the gas station. I will only use my first name, Jalessa, and refer to my friend as Kim. The event. I was sitting in my car at the gas station, in the middle of my small town in the southeastern United States. I was waiting for my friend Kim to return with some cool drinks for us. It was sunny and very warm, around 82 degrees. I was watching the traffic go by. There are only 2 lanes down the middle of the town. I saw a man walking on the opposite side of the street, holding a little girl's hand. She had short dark hair and pink top and shorts. The man was wearing jeans, a grey t-shirt, and was holding a cigarette in the other hand. They stopped, and they were waiting to cross the street. We do not have a sidewalk, so they were more in the middle of the street. I watched for a few minutes, then looked around and glanced back at them. Then 2 large trucks drove by, blocking my view of the 2 for a few seconds. After the traffic cleared, the man began to cross the street, but now he was also holding the hand of another little girl. Yes, there were now 2 of them. The same one from before, and a new little girl with long dark hair and red shorts and top. I could not believe it. Where did the second little girl come from? There were no people on that side of the street, no stores for her to have come from. She was just suddenly there, no traffic stopped and let her out. The street was empty except for them. I watched in confusion as they crossed the street and passed in front of my car to walk into the post office. It was like she just materialized out of thin air. It only took a few seconds for those 2 large pickup trucks to pass. I was and still am very confused by this. When Kim returned, I told her what I saw. She believed me and didn't think I was crazy, as we've been friends for years. She couldn't offer any explanation either. But this is what she said. "You know how creepy our little town has gotten lately?" I agreed. There have been some very strange things happening since last year, but those are other stories for other times. 2. I don't know if you would classify this as a glitch story or a doppelganger story, but I had a puzzling encounter with a stranger that I cannot explain. This incident happened 20 years or so ago. At the time, I was about 2 years out of the local community theatre, at which I had volunteered as stage manager and production assistant for 8 years. The theatre had closed, and the social connections I had forged during my time there had eroded, as often happens when the centre of a group's life ceases to exist. In addition to the theatre, I had also attended the local community college and university. Too many years at each, actually, as I couldn't settle on a major. So, between the colleges and the theatre, I had met hundreds of people across all walks of life, who lived, studied, and worked in the area. One characteristic I have always had, and have always been embarrassed by, is that I'm terrible at remembering names. However, as a visual artist, I have a good memory for faces, and would often recognize a stranger's face, even if I could not attach a name to it, nor even recollect where I had met that person, nor how I know them. Between my time at 2 colleges and the community theatre, I was constantly seeing faces that I recognized. On this day, my young daughter and I were walking down the central street of the small university town in which we lived. A man about my own age, or a bit younger, passed us going in the opposite direction. He suddenly stopped and said gushingly, "Oh hey, hi, how are you?" "I beg your pardon?" I said. His happy face fell somewhat. Then he brightened again and said, "Oh come on, Kathy." "I know it's been a while, what, a year? So where have you been? You just kind of dropped out of sight, no one has seen you. Is this your niece? She's really cute." As he prattled out these words, I could only stand there gawping at him. Even though he had my name wrong, I struggled to try to remember where I knew him from. Surely I had to know this guy, and if there was a mistake, it was on him for misremembering my name and my relationship to the little girl beside me. But try as I might, I could not place him. He was absolutely unfamiliar to me. His face was that of a stranger whom I had never met. "I'm sorry," I said, "but you must have me confused with someone else. My name isn't Kathy. This is my daughter, and I'm sure that I don't know you." He refused to believe me. He insisted that we knew each other, and was annoyed because he thought I was Kathy, the prankster, pulling his leg and pretending not to know him, pretending to have a daughter. He went into this complex social dossier of people that we supposedly knew in common, places and events and social interactions, roommates and where I supposedly lived, and even conversations. This wasn't a case of two people who might have met casually, and only once in some dim past 5 or 10 years ago. He was describing a long-term and fairly recent social relationship within a group of friends. He told me his name, which of course I can't recall now, but I didn't know his name either, nor the names of any of the people he mentioned. He couldn't believe I didn't know any of that stuff, and even asked if I was okay. If I had been in an accident or something. I was not just puzzled, but was actually alarmed. It was just too strange, and it had me doubting my own memory. I also started wondering if this was some ruse by a crazy guy, or a predator. And I wanted to run away. At the same time, I wanted to stick around and figure this thing out. I'm a sucker for mysteries, and this was shaping up into a doozy. "Really, dude?" I pressed. "I don't know you, I'm not Kathy." He too began to doubt, and his eyes widened while his brows crumpled together. I began to feel sorry for him, as he was obviously becoming distressed. "Look, here's my ID," I said, whipping my wallet from my back jeans pocket. I showed him my state-issued photo ID, my social security card, and my old student ID. It was only then that he acquiesced. "I can't believe it," he said. "You look exactly like Kathy." He proceeded to tell me how my face, my physique, my hair, eyes, teeth — I have crooked teeth — all looked exactly like the person he knows as Kathy. He said my voice, mannerisms, mannish clothing choices, everything was the same. He looked really freaked out now, and I was right there with him. I could feel my eyes water up. I asked him what happened to her. He didn't know. All he and his friends knew was that she had moved away about a year ago, and no one had heard from her since then. We made our mutual apologies, he for accosting me with his insistence that I was someone I'm not, and me for not being the long-lost friend he so obviously missed. We went our separate ways. At one point we both looked back. It was the strangest 15 minutes I have ever experienced, and given how paranormally weird my life has been, that's saying something. To add another layer of strangeness to this encounter was the name Kathy. My name is Cindy, and I never felt that name was right for me. Cynthia has always been too elitist or ladylike or something. It always made me think of well-bred Victorian ingenues from romance novels. I am far from being that kind of woman. From the time I was a teenager, I had thought that a more appropriate name for me would be Kathy, or Kat. 3. A couple months back, around the end of November, beginning of December, my stepfather and I were out shopping. We bought the usual items like bread, milk, and the like. While browsing, I had a craving for sweets, so I ended up buying this chocolate-flavored foam dessert. Unfortunately, I can't recall the name. There is 2 of them in one box. The cream itself is in a clay pot cup thing. I don't really know the specific name of it. It's about 1 inch high and 2 inch in diameter, and shaped like those small hand cream containers. The dessert itself had a strong semi-sweet chocolate flavor, After we ate them, I asked my stepfather if we need the clay pots or not. He said no, so I just put them in the trash. Him saying no was a bit odd, because he is a bit like a hoarder, as in keeping almost everything on the assumption that later it could be useful. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and I have a craving for sweets again. I ask him to buy one of those chocolate things again, and he is just looking at me with a confused look on his face, and asks what I am talking about. Then I go on to describe it. You know, this small clay pot with foam like chocolate in it. There is 2 in a box, and we just bought them a couple weeks ago in the local Iceland for about £1.50 to £2. I live in London, by the way. At this point, my mother and sister are there as well, just like when we bought it. But none of them has any memory of that ever happening. I had a very clear memory of the flavor and the image of throwing the 2 clay pots into the trash. And this really confused me. A possible explanation is that 2 parallel universes overlapped, and I slipped into the other one for a short time, but who knows. 4. When I was 19, I got pregnant with my first child. 3 days before I went to the hospital to have her, my stepdad's grandfather, my papa, killed himself. He was in his late 80s, and age had caught up with him. He wasn't able to take care of himself anymore, and was very depressed from losing his love, my granny. The day I had my daughter was the day of his funeral. A little over a year later, I met the love of my life. We dated for a year, found out I was pregnant with my second child, we got engaged and bought a house together. During my pregnancy, my fiancé's grandfather was battling lung cancer. For the longest, he stayed in the hospital, but towards the end, he decided to go home to be with his family. He passed away 3 days before I had my son. The funeral was the same day I had him. This has to be the biggest coincidence of my life, or curse, or maybe it was supposed to happen exactly the way it did. It's so strange that both deaths happened exactly 3 days before I gave birth, and that the funerals were the same day they were born. I'm scared that if we have another child, it will happen again. I know that you probably won't consider this a glitch story. I don't even know what kind of story you would call it. Maybe someone out there has had something similar happen to them. Similar situations happening in the same timeline. 5. These stories were sent exclusively to Hellfreezer. When I was younger, there were actual arcades and malls. I went to the nearest mall to spend some time in the arcade, and I found a game to play. So I put in my money and started the game. It was a side-scroller just like Final Fight, and I was toughly engrossed in the game. I had selected the character wearing the red jacket and hat, with the blue jeans, and the other option was a character with long blonde hair, in a white tank top with white pants. I was beating up generic enemies, picking up weapons they dropped like bats and swords. The entire time I was there, no one else came near this cabinet for some reason. The odd part is, there was no title on the screen, only a start button where you went to a character select screen, and had only the 2 characters. I never did finish the game as I ran out of money when I was on the bridge level. I went back to the arcade a few days later and the cabinet was gone. Nothing was in its place and there was no indications that it had ever been there. I asked the guys in charge and they did not know what I was talking about. It was very hard to forget playing a side-scroller game, using Terry and Andy Bogard from the Fatal Fury King of Fighters series, when he was never in one of those type games. Could I have stepped into a different dimension briefly? Or could this have been a glitch? Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to, what am I going to call this? Subscriber Glitch Stories, there we go. Thank you very much for listening to Subscriber Glitch Stories. And big thanks to all my subscribers who sent their glitch stories in for use in, well, not this video, because I don't usually do just subscriber-only stories, but thanks very much for sending your stories in. To be honest with you, I'm running a little bit low on the regular type of subscriber stories, like your Let's Not Meet type stories and the paranormal ones. I still have them, and I think I've got enough to do maybe 1 or 2 videos, but I decided this week we'd shake things up a little bit, and do subscriber stories as well. I think I'm going to do something a bit different on Wednesday too. I might be doing Bigfoot stories on Wednesday. Not new features, certainly not, but what the hell, it's good to try new things now and again, and while I'm sitting with my toes up, I can have my channel can be having lots of fun too. Okay, and with that I think I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.